Hello. Open Home, Open Bible, and I'm Richard Buse, welcoming you to this next edition in our series of programmes, and we're in the home of Sir Cliff Richard right now, and I'm going to ask Cliff whether he would read to us from a passage that is really integral to our study, from Ephesians chapter 6, starting at verse 10.
Absolutely. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armour of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of your righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints.
Wonderful. Well, you know, in the group, the members of the group can adopt one piece of armour for themselves and talk about it a little bit. I don't know which piece of armour you like best here, Cliff, but we might come back to that in a moment. Here's the Christian out there in the world. And, you know, in John 17, verse 14, Jesus says that the Christian is not of this world. What does he mean by the world? I mean, he hardly means that we're aliens from another planet.
No, I'm sure he doesn't mean that. It's just that the world represents something and God represents something else. And somehow or another we are in the world, born in amongst other people. And somehow we have to stand out and away from it.
Because of its fallenness, I suppose.
Because of what it is, yes. We have to be the ones that are recognizably forgiven and therefore in a position to offer this forgiveness, this salvation that the Bible talks about to others. It's a difficult area because doesn't Paul say we can be in the world but not of the world?
Yes, he does.
And basically, I guess that's it. Mm. We have to be in it. We are human. We're born of mothers and fathers, and so therefore we're here. But we don't have to agree with all that's bad, and we can actually attempt to alleviate some of the suffering, and just play our part, I guess, and be different.
And we're meant to be different in a kind of rather hostile environment at times. I mean, here the context in Ephesians 6:10 onwards is of conflict going on. Mm. Be strong in the Lord, put on the full armour of God, and then the struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, principalities, authorities, and so forth. When did you first become aware that there was a kind of spiritual battle going on?
Well, I was aware of spiritualness, I suppose, from very, very early in my life. But when I became a Christian, that's when it really all came together. That I began to, and funny enough, you to think about it, here he is telling us to put everything on. You'd think, wouldn't you, that having battled through and fought through and discussed and argued with people, that when you became a Christian, you'd go, oh, right, I can take off everything now. And in fact, here we are being told to put it all on. Yeah. That in fact, once you start this life, you're actually going to be in the forefront of things, regardless of where your station in life is, whether you're a child at school or a student in a college or wherever you might be. That we actually are being, in a way, warned that we'll need to have this. And of course, the longer you are a Christian, certainly I became aware of, by reading the Bible, it told me that there was a spiritual battle. This is not to do with the battles we have, whether it be World War I or World War II, which were both unnecessary and evil. But the battle that's harder to fight is against a force you can't see. But you know it exists because you've had it in your life already. You know, before we become Christians, what are we? We're nothing. We're just tools of anything around there that might want to use us. Most of us who are Christians can actually admit to having done horrible things and been part of the devil's work, I guess, for a while. When you become a Christian, you throw that out and need to put on this breastplate and the armor and all of that. We need that to get us through the rest of life. That's why I can never understand. No, I do understand. I can understand why people think that Christianity is the easy option, is because they don't know anything about it. And all they do is see people go to church and think that's all it is. They just walk from their home to their church. And they don't realize that God is calling us to be in a very difficult position, to be with a great horde of other religions and philosophies who will be battling against us.
Yeah, sure. Me being a clergyman, of course, I speak with many, many people who are new believers, and they'll often come and say, look, I'm in a most terrible fix because I've become a Christian and now my problems have been multiplied. It's even worse.
Yes.
Do I need to start all over again at square one? The temptations I'm facing and so forth are terrific. And I always say to them then, actually, it's quite a good sign. The fact that you're up against it means you really have turned around and you're now going against the current somewhat. And so it's not a bad sign, it's quite a good sign.
Satan must hate it when people turn to Jesus. I mean, he's lost. He's losing. The game that he's playing is to keep us away from Jesus and God. The minute, he must hate it. The very fact that we're sitting here talking about all these things that were written by all these wonderful guys about Jesus, about God, and how we can get to him, Satan at this minute must be dying to get at us. He must recognize that where two or three are gathered together, then Jesus is in our midst. So all of us who are studying, looking, reading, we have an armor that's impenetrable as far as Satan is concerned. And so therefore, though, you're right when you told me, it does become more difficult. In a way, when I look back at my career, in many, many instances, it probably would have been just easier to get on with it. Just get on, do my thing, earn my money, go and buy my house in Barbados and live there forever. But in fact, it doesn't work that way, even for people in my position. Life got more difficult because I found I had to make a stand, regardless of what people thought. And, when I first became a Christian, people weren't Christians and pop singers. They were in America, funnily enough. America was far more open to this than ever we were. And even now, they're far more open to the fact that a top star might come on and accept an award and say, I thank God for this award. I don't remember ever hearing anybody say that in Britain. Even I didn't say it, funnily enough. I should. I'm going to start saying that.
Yeah, I've heard sports people saying that from
Yes.
time to time. So Jesus doesn't want us to be living out in the desert in a kind of monastic hermit-like existence in trying to keep intact. We're obviously meant to be out there in the world. And how do you manage, therefore, to do that, to be in the thick of it all and to remain intact and sort of, in one sense, distinct?
Well, I suppose it's different for all of us. The wonderful thing about Christianity is that we don't all become a bunch of robots that are switched on. We become individual Christians. We maintain characteristics that were originally Cliff or originally Richard or whatever. Certain things change, yes, but you essentially remain yourself. And I've found that for me to maintain my walk with Jesus is to be sure that I don't stop praying and that I don't stop reading and that I don't stop allowing myself to be got at. Because you're right, we're not meant to be in the desert. We're actually meant to be in the marketplace. Jesus was in the marketplace, even criticized for being with sinners, which is a ludicrous criticism when you think that's who he came for. So we're in the same, I know we're not Jesus, of course, but we're hoping that bits of him rub off on us. And therefore, if we're going to be as Paul wants to be, Paul was saying, I want to be he must be a part of me, I want to be a part of him. The one way we can do that is to physically say, okay, I'm going to get out and do something that was similar to what Jesus would have done, which means being in the marketplace, which means keep your job if you become a Christian. You don't have to leave your job. Unless you're a striptease artist, you may have to think twice about that one. But generally, people have normal sort of jobs, and there's no need to think you have to be a missionary, though you might be. The main thing is to stay where you are and remain in a way vulnerable. It's when people feel you're vulnerable that they'll come and talk and argue.
That's dead right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I like what you say also about it being rubbing off from him and rubbing off from others also onto us. Actually, Augustine of old, 1,500 years ago, talked about one loving spirit sets another on fire. So it is caught as much as taught, and we can sort of have to encourage each other in these groups and so forth in which we are able to meet.
I'm always slightly worried because I've been used in this way that people think they need to be like me. You know, and I've constantly said, but I'm so lucky that I've got this career and I've got the platform. The person, the new Christian who can listen to the worries and the problems of somebody else, as you say, that's one spirit meeting another. That's how you can set fire. You don't have to be a Billy Graham.
You don't.
You just have to be you, giving yourself to somebody else and being available for a while. And I've often thought, I'm not very good at listening. I tend to talk too much. but there's a gift and it's a talent to be able to allow someone else to pour their hearts out to you, and then you can present the love of Jesus because they're so thrilled that you've listened anyway that they'll probably listen to that as well. Whether they become Christians or not doesn't depend on us. That certainly depends on the work of the Spirit. But at least we will have comforted and been of some help.
I guess, Cliff, that part of the putting on of the armour that we're reading about there in Ephesians 6 is kind of developing one's own Christian worldview, our own interpretation of life, so that as we go through this world, we're actually armed mentally, spiritually, so that we can say that I know my way around. I mean, I'm a tennis fanatic like you. I love tennis. And the first time I ever went to Wimbledon, I thought, I own this place. It's part of me. You know, I felt I knew my way around. I knew where number 1 court was. I knew where the BBC studio was. I knew where everything was. People would ask me the way. At one point, when I was selling ice creams there as a student, I'd say, oh, yeah, I knew it. Yep. I felt I owned it in a strange kind of way. How does that seem to be with you when we look at the world and feeling, in one sense, a part of it?
Well, this is coming back to things we've said earlier, that we are in the world. We just mustn't be of it. But we need to be world wise. You know, street cred is something they talk about now all the time. And in a way, some of us as Christians have lost credibility in the street. I'm not suggesting that we go out and become drug pushers, but we need to know what's happening so that we are armed. It's whenever, I mean, we can't know everything. I've discovered this over the years that, in a way, I know so little. But if I'm going to, for instance, be somewhere and I'm going to publicly be asked about something, I'll find out about that something so that I'm armed with an answer. And also, if you discover what there is to know around you, you can translate it into what this is, into what the Bible is. You don't have to quote the Bible necessarily. I find it really difficult to remember chunks of the Bible, but I remember chunks of the meaning. So I can say, well, what the Bible says is this, and you can bring that to play. But you need to be worldly wise, really. You're absolutely right. The minute you know about these things, the minute you know your way around Wimbledon, you're actually armed with information. And the best armour, I mean, in terms of arming ourselves with information, it can only come from the Bible. There's no other way. You can have the wisdom of other men and women, but in the end, it has to relate to what's in here. If you can't see, if you've read something in a book and you can't find it in here, I think you have every right to dump it. Not this, the other bit.
Sure. Yeah, and it's the scriptures that keep the perspective so that they will tell us in the scriptures. Here we are, another bit I've looked at. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 31. This world, in its present form, is passing away. So it's not going to be here forever. By the extraordinary providence and grace of God, Christ is at the centre of everything, of the universe, and his church with him, his people. And you know, if you put that to Caligula, way back in when it was 1st century AD, and said, do you know that the church is at the centre of the universe? He said, church, what's that? Or Stalin would have said, church? How many divisions have they got?
Yes.
But actually, Jesus and his church are at the centre, and the world is going to be passing away.
Yep.
We will arm ourselves with that for the future. We have to take these pieces of armour seriously, and meanwhile, we must thank Sir Cliff Richard very, very much indeed for participating with us in this fascination of study together.
It's been good for me. Thank you.